This is our garden from the most recent growing season. But it did not start this way many years ago when we began to homestead. Let me tell you a story that started in 2017. And then later I'm going to explain how our homestead grew from 2017 to 2018, 2019, and then explain what we're currently doing at our homestead to this day. In 2017, I was talking to a man from my church who was a farmer, an experienced farmer of many years, and he heard that I was interested in starting a homestead specifically to raise some kind of animal that would provide meat. He told me that raising meat rabbits was by far the easiest thing to start with, and he was absolutely right. That was some of the best homesteading advice I have ever received. After a couple of weeks, I purchased my very own meat rabbits. I started with 2 females and 1 male. I built my own rabbit cages, I built all my own nesting boxes, and I even built a water system that I wouldn't have to fill up their water for several weeks at a time. Once the cages were built, I even expanded the cages for grow-outs for the little babies that would eventually be butchered, and then we had a lot of meat in just a few months. We would cook it fresh on the grill, save some of it to be frozen, put in the freezer for later, or just enjoy with some friends. I even ended up selling some of the meat in my very first year. This brings us to the next year, 2018. I wanted to do meat rabbits again, so I continued that. I added meat chickens because I heard those were pretty easy, and I wanted to start a garden, even though I had never really grown anything before. I wanted to start with something that would be easy, require no tools, and it's just something I can do in a flat area, maybe just in an afternoon. So after researching, I decided to get a whole bunch of lumber, a whole bunch of pavers or blocks that you could hold the lumber together. I came up with a neat little design. It required no screws, nails, drills, or anything, and I put together this garden right here. It's my first one. It's a raised garden, and I heard that raised bed gardening is easier because you don't have to incorporate nutrients into the soil. You could just purchase soil, so you kind of hit the ground running, even though it is a little bit more expensive starting out. As I was building the garden, of course, I needed to fill it with soil. The one mistake I did make was that I filled the entire thing with soil instead of layering things with organic material such as sticks or rocks or something that just helped the drainage below, so I ended up spending about twice as much money in soil. But since it was my first garden ever, it's one of the lessons I learned, and of course, I haven't done that since. It's been much more affordable filling raised beds ever since this has occurred. Instead of buying plant starts, I decided to grow everything from seed. I thought that was really important, rather than just buying transplants and putting them in the garden. So I grew everything from seed. I wasn't the greatest at it, but it worked. I even grew so many different tomatoes from seed that I needed to purchase buckets to put them in the patio. Now, this is a property I did not own, so I needed to be careful about what I was doing, which is why I created a garden that could easily be moved instead of digging into the ground, and why I used buckets on the patio rather than planting these tomatoes directly into the ground. Once the garden was established, I put a lot of mulch on there, something I still do. I need to use straw. Now I use leaves because I have the resources where I currently live. And once the straw was put down, I realized that I needed to start getting some plants in the ground, and I started with a whole bunch of different things: onions, beans, carrots, tomatoes, all kinds of different things. As a matter of fact, I grew so many different tomatoes, it was just crazy. Some mistakes I made were growing too many of the same type of variety. For example, just too many tomato types. I just needed to simplify that, which I've done now in my later years of homesteading. We had a good radish harvest. It was really coming in strong. To be honest, I don't know if I would have done much different my first year gardening in that little raised bed. Our onions were coming up, lettuce was great, the carrots were coming through. I couldn't believe my very first year gardening would be this successful, which taught me a valuable lesson. You need good seeds, and you need good soil, and obviously you need good drainage. If you have those things, you are going to have a fantastic garden, unless something really weird happens with pests or some natural disaster or some type of drought or heat wave, or just bad weather in general that season. But I don't know how much more I could have done to have this garden be more successful than it was, especially for the first year. I did not get into vertical gardening until years later, so everything was kind of just at ground level or the level of the raised bed. but it was really coming strong. We had excellent tomatoes, and every time I went out to the garden around harvest time, we would get a little bowl of produce that eventually grew and grew over time. Just something I was really proud of. I didn't know anything about thinning out carrots, so I kind of just took all the carrots that came. That's expected your first year. And then we ended up eating some fresh, but also processing some of the carrots and putting in the freezer that we can enjoy later. Very successful year, especially the first time ever gardening. The next thing I did in 2018 was raise meat chickens. For the brooder, I just use a portable tractor, the same thing I pull the chickens around in to keep them safe, out in the yard. You'll see that in just a moment here. I think I ordered about 50 of them for the first year. I thought that was a little bit more manageable. Cute little fuzzy chickens. They started off for the first 3 weeks in the garage in this portable shelter, and then for the next 5 weeks until they get to butcher weight, which should be around 8 weeks total, that's when you're going to want to put them outside on grass. You can see the shelter right here. For the first couple weeks when they were on grass, weeks 4 and 5 of their life, I think I had all the chickens in one shelter. That works out because they're small, they don't poop as much, and they don't need as much space. This is my little setup here with the garden and the chickens. I was a little paranoid, so I did put a heat lamp in there at night, and I also put a fence around, even though that is really not necessary for the most part. Once they eventually get bigger, which happens really fast with meat chickens, by the way, I then built another chicken tractor to double up, and now I have 2. So I have 2 chicken tractors for these chickens, and it worked out pretty well. I was really proud to have chickens, rabbits, and a fairly successful garden all in the same summer, my second summer homesteading. The chickens grew fast, and eventually what happened was they required more and more feed, more and more space. So what I did then was open up the chicken tractor just by propping one end on a bucket and then letting them kind of free range out in the poultry netting, which is just charged by a solar charger, as you can see at the bottom of the frame there. Even during my second year homesteading, I knew that being portable was essential for scalability, which homesteading really is. You want to be able to scale up, scale down, and move around where you need to. Then after 8 weeks, I load them up into the same shelter, put them in the back of a pickup truck, which is why I always build my shelters 4x8. And then, next thing you know, boom, you've got enough meat to last you for the entire year, and it only took you 8 weeks to raise those chickens that you can fill up your freezer and enjoy for an entire year with your family. It's a really cool feeling and a very efficient way of homesteading, raising meat chickens. In January of 2019, it was a very exciting time because I had my own property that I could do more with. I did meat chickens, a garden, maple syrup, firewood, and I added laying chickens. I decided not to continue with meat rabbits. For the laying chickens, I ordered 15 ISA Browns, which is a hybrid type of chicken known for eggs. I started off by creating a little tiny brooder in my basement, which was 2 feet wide, 2 feet tall, and 4 feet long. Really simple build. I put them in my basement because I ordered the chickens in February, I think, and they were obviously not old enough to go outside. It was freezing, and in 2019, in February, we had record amounts of snow. It was a really, really long winter and spring. When the little chickens arrived, they were cute and adorable. If you've ever had egg-laying chickens and meat chickens, you can appreciate egg-laying chickens so much more. They're just easier to deal with. They're much more lively. They're much more chicken-like, and that's something I noticed and appreciated right away. They were in the basement for quite a long time. As a matter of fact, I started running out of room in that little brooder, as you can probably imagine, so I had to build a bigger shelter with chicken wire about 4 feet tall because they kept jumping out, and I just basically had a little chicken coop in the basement until they were ready to go outside, until the weather actually allowed them to go outside. I started building a portable chicken coop that I could wheel around. This was really cool for me because I just really like the idea of being portable and being able to put animals wherever you want them based on your needs. It's always really fun to me to build things like this. And I basically had the same concept of chicken tractor on grass or a rabbit tractor on grass to put them on fresh grass each day, except this one I added wheels, which made it a lot easier to move. And the chickens were off the ground at night, so they weren't in any cold weather or the frost. They had little perches with 2x2s that went across so they could perch at night. Most of the manure fell through. It was something with big wheels that I could move around even in snow. I had no problem moving it around. It was plenty long for 15 chickens. As a matter of fact, it was actually too big. They could easily get in and out. The ramp acted as a door. It was just a really cool little build that I was really proud of and I was really happy to use instead of going to a stationary coop where everything kind of builds up and you're not actually able to move it around. I even had access to the egg boxes, that being milk crates. That 2x2 swung down so they could perch and then enter the nest box comfortably. It also blocked them from going in there at night and manuring in the nest boxes. They pulled out in the back. It was super convenient. First time I put the chickens on grass, I just put them in poultry netting and gave them a little box to hide in during the day if they wanted to go in there. I was basically just trying to familiarize them with being outside. That was the first day they actually went outside in the spring when the snow finally went away, just to get them comfortable with what's going to be going on in their environment. It's a very nice day as a chicken owner to put your chickens on grass for the first time. When it came to the winter, I have an old shed that I decided to use the corner to build a more permanent structure that they could be kept safe with and out of the elements from the snow and the cold weather here in Wisconsin. I still think being portable is key. Always having portable poultry netting, a portable coop is really important, although I don't do that now, but that's for a different video and for different reasons. It was very important at the time because I didn't know where on my homestead I wanted these animals to go. And a little bit of advice is to make sure you know before you build something permanent. I also had a proud moment where I started getting eggs from these chickens after about 5 months, and a lot of eggs. They're prolific egg layers. And that's another proud day as a chicken owner to finally start getting some return on your investment. Once they reach 5 months, most chickens start laying, and I was really looking forward to the day that we could start having our own eggs rather than having to purchase them from somewhere else. That same year, I continued doing meat chickens, but I got better and better, which means I can get more meat chickens and have more shelters and have a better system for how that was going to work on our property. Instead of pulling them out by hand, I used a lawnmower. I got a lot smarter, at least to get them in position where the chickens would have to enter them. I would put 3 in a row. You can see the egg layers behind there, so I have a little homestead set up. I ran out of metal roofing, so I had to use some OSB on the side, which obviously doesn't work very well once it gets wet, but you eventually replace it. And then, just like the previous year, I did like to prop up the structures and let the chickens kind of do more of a free range thing. You can see they're not with the egg layers, there's a fence in between, but it's kind of a big system of meat chickens and egg layers all combined. The first thing I recommend any homesteader to buy is a wood stove. It is the most important thing in our house. It keeps us warm. No matter what happens, the power can go out, it doesn't make a difference. We can cook on it, or inside of it at least if we need to. It keeps our pipes from freezing. It is our lifeline when things can go wrong. So the first thing I did is I installed my own wood stove. It was the first thing I bought that had any major money value here on the homestead. It was very, very important and something that I recommend everybody does because you never know when you're going to need it. Since we had trees for firewood, that also means we have trees for maple syrup. There's a lot of maple trees in Wisconsin. All I did was take a basic 5-gallon bucket, put it on a nail, and hung it there until it got full, set it aside, and kind of repeated the process till I thought we had enough. I didn't have a target goal for what I was going for, but I did know I wanted to use a turkey fryer to boil the sap rather than having an expensive setup to start, and I'm glad I did that because it was a cheap way to get going. After a while, I would bring in what was a little bit more finished and put it on the stove. As you can see, the color turns there. Once it was done, we ended up with 4 pints of finished maple syrup, which is very good. I was very proud of it. We make way more now, but for the time, it was something I was really proud of. Let's fast forward to our current homesteading situation. As you can see in this chart, we're still doing meat chickens, egg-laying chickens, garden, maple syrup, and firewood. Those are the 5 essential things that I do on the homestead here. So not only are we doing the 5 things from 2019, but we're doing them so much better. We have an amazing garden every single year. It literally turns into a jungle. So much better than years before. And it's not actually that big of a garden. It's only 20 by 40, but we get a ton of food from this garden. We only purchase high quality seeds. We make sure it's got the best soil. I get calls and requests to come over and see our garden throughout the summer months, especially once you get towards the harvest season. People want to come over and just to see it. It's right next to our permaculture chicken setup. We get massive harvest just in one harvest of green beans. It fills up half of a table. We are much better at canning things. We're much better at picking things and getting things to eat fresh at the same time. We started canning all of our tomatoes to make sauce. Some are fresh, some are frozen. It's just one of those things that we've kind of gotten dialed in, and it hasn't been 30 years since we've gotten things dialed in. Each year has improved. We get massive harvests of each crop because we believe that having one crop that we love, we better make sure that we're going to get as much of that crop we possibly can. So instead of growing 30 things and getting some, we want to grow 10 different species and get a lot, enough of that species to get us through the year with that particular crop. We get things that we didn't expect, like sweet potatoes, to grow really well in Wisconsin. I have a permanent chicken coop now that works really well. We're getting eggs every single day. I've adjusted our chicken breeds to, in my opinion, better breeds for us that are more sustainable. Heritage breeds that are capable of raising their young rather than just for eggs. Our raised bed garden gets better every year. We constantly have food coming in and out of it. Every little spot gets filled with some type of plant. We've got perennial fruit now, along with our annual crops that we rotate in and out. In addition to all that, we're having way more firewood each year. It's getting a lot more efficient. We're about 2 or 3 years ahead on firewood, which makes me feel really good because I don't have to worry about cutting firewood every single year when you've got so much cut in advance. The eggs just keep pouring in. We've got beautiful chicken that we can eat throughout the year when we have meat chickens. The garden just keeps getting better every single year. And when maple syrup, we are pretty basic, but we get a lot more because we do an open fire boil that gives us a lot more maple syrup in just one burn. It's truly a blessing to have this lifestyle.